What happens when Hollywood royalty meets Bravo royalty, and the gloves come off? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Andy Cohen for what was meant to be a friendly, career-boosting appearance, only to spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night TV history. The Duchess came ready to control the narrative. What she didn't realize was, Andy Cohen wasn't playing by her rules. From the moment Meghan stepped onto the Watch What Happens live set, the tension was unmistakable. Dressed in an immaculate cream blazer, probably worth more than most people's rent, she carried herself with that trademark confidence she'd perfected since leaving the royal family. But tonight, something was different. Behind his desk, Andy Cohen sat with his signature smirk, the look every Bravo fan knows means trouble. Welcome back to Watch What Happens Live. I'm Andy Cohen, and tonight we have the Duchess of Sussex herself, Meghan Markle, he announced, his tone carrying that subtle, teasing edge. The applause was polite, not thunderous. Meghan's smile tightened ever so slightly as she settled into her seat. "Thank you so much for having me, Andy. I'm thrilled to be here," she said, her media-trained voice smooth and poised. But the slight tension in her shoulders told another story. She crossed her legs gracefully, expecting a safe, soft-focused chat, another stop on her carefully managed media tour. Andy leaned back, swirling his drink. "So, Meghan, you've been busy. New projects, life in California. But I have to ask about something that's been on everyone's mind." He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uneasy. "There's been a lot of talk about your relationship with your father, Thomas Markle. He's been pretty vocal in the press lately." Meghan's smile faltered for a split second before returning to place. But the crack had shown. Andy had found the first weak spot. "Well, Andy," she began, her tone still measured, "family relationships can be complicated. I think it's important to focus on moving forward, and on the positive work we're doing with Archewell, rather than dwelling on tabloid narratives." Andy nodded, but he wasn't done. "But these aren't just tabloid narratives, are they? Your father says he's tried to reach out, and from what I understand, he wasn't even invited to your wedding." "That seems pretty definitive." A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the glossy interview they'd expected. Meghan's jaw tightened. She leaned forward slightly, defensive, composed, but clearly irritated. "There's a lot of misinformation out there," she replied, her voice edged with warning. "My father made choices that put my safety and my family's safety at risk. Working with tabloids, staging photos, speaking to reporters without my consent. Those aren't the actions of someone protecting their daughter." Andy raised an eyebrow, sensing blood in the water. "But he's also said he feels cut off completely. He's asked to meet his grandchildren. Doesn't he deserve a chance to make amends?" The question hung heavy in the studio air. Meghan's polished calm began to fray. Her next words came sharper, colder. "Andy, I find it interesting that you'd take the word of someone who sold stories about me to the press over mine. My father had every chance to handle things privately, and he chose the opposite. I have to protect my children from that kind of toxicity." The audience sat frozen. Even Andy looked slightly thrilled. He'd cracked the royal armor. "I'm not taking anyone's side," Andy said smoothly. "I'm asking what people want to know. And speaking of protecting your children, some critics say you and Harry talk about privacy while doing very public interviews and projects. Some might call that hypocritical." The word hit like a slap. Meghan's grip tightened on the arms of her chair. For a moment, her composure slipped entirely. "That's a completely unfair characterization," she shot back, her voice rising. "We've been very selective about when and how we share our story. Everything we've done has been about correcting lies and pushing back against years of racist, distorted reporting. That's not hypocrisy, that's survival." The air was electric. Meghan had dropped the royal filter. Andy had his viral moment. And the audience? They knew they'd just witnessed late-night television history. Andy's eyes flickered with interest. At the mention of racism, he'd just found another pressure point. "I absolutely support your right to call out racist coverage," he began smoothly. "But some critics say you tend to invoke racism only when other criticisms don't land. Even Piers Morgan has—" "Don't," Meghan cut in sharply, her tone slicing through the air like a blade. "Don't you dare quote Piers Morgan to me. That man has been obsessed with me for years. His behavior borders on stalking. The fact that you'd even bring up his name says everything about what kind of interview this really is. The studio went dead silent. This was no longer celebrity banter, it was a standoff. Andy's smirk faded. His posture straightened. He knew he'd hit the mark. "Meghan," he said carefully, "I'm just asking about public statements and the criticism that's out there. If you can't handle questions about your public persona and the choices you've made, maybe doing interviews isn't the right move." The line landed like a punch. A faint flush crept across Meghan's face. Anger, maybe embarrassment. She clearly hadn't expected this level of pushback. She'd walked in anticipating another sympathetic chat. Instead, she was facing interrogation. "I can handle questions just fine, Andy," she said, her voice taut with controlled fury. "What I can't handle are false narratives and hit pieces dressed up as journalism. I came here expecting a respectful conversation about my work, not another platform for the same tired attacks that have followed me for years." Andy set his cocktail down and met her gaze head-on. His tone dropped, low and steady. "This is a respectful conversation, Meghan. These are fair questions about your public statements. If they make you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about the positions you've taken than the questions I'm asking." The tension was unbearable. When the show cut to commercial, the studio buzzed with uneasy energy. Meghan adjusted her blazer with clipped, irritated movements while Andy leaned in to whisper something to his producers. Neither looked at the other. When the cameras rolled again, the air was heavier, charged. "Welcome back to Watch What Happens Live," Andy announced, his voice carrying a dangerous calm that Bravo fans knew meant fireworks. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and before the break, we were talking about public criticism surrounding her media strategy." He turned toward her, his smile thin, deliberate. "Now, Meghan, I want to touch on something that's been bothering a lot of people. That Oprah interview, you and Harry made some serious allegations about the royal family. But since then, several of your claims have been questioned." Meghan's shoulders tensed. She'd known this might come up, but not like this. "I stand by everything we said in that interview," she said coolly. "Every word was true. And frankly, I'm tired of defending my lived experience to people who weren't there and have no idea what we went through." Andy leaned back, eyes gleaming. "But that's the thing, Meghan. Some of your lived experience doesn't line up with documented facts." He paused just long enough to let it sting. "For example, you told Oprah that you and Harry were married 3 days before the royal wedding, but the Archbishop of Canterbury later clarified that it was just a private exchange of vows, not a legal ceremony." That's not a small detail. Color drained from Meghan's face. She hadn't expected him to go this deep, or this prepared. "That's semantics," she shot back, though her tone had lost its earlier steel. "The point was about the emotional and spiritual commitment we made. The legal ceremony was just for show." "Semantics," Andy repeated, eyebrows raised. "Meghan, you told Oprah, and I quote, that you got married 3 days before the public ceremony. Those were your exact words. When the head of the Church of England has to publicly correct you, that's not semantics, that's a factual error, at best." He let the last 2 words hang. "At best?" Meghan snapped, her composure finally slipping. "What exactly are you implying, Andy?" The audience was riveted. No one moved. Andy's expression hardened. All traces of charm gone. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You made claims that have been proven false. Even your timeline about having your passport and keys taken away doesn't match up with royal engagements you attended during that period." The silence that followed was deafening. A live, televised chess match where the next move could make or break everything. Both men seemed to forget they were on live television. The studio lights burned hot, but it was the rising tension between them that made the air feel electric. Prince Harry was no longer the polished, media-savvy figure who had strolled onto the set an hour earlier. The calm confidence was gone, replaced by defensiveness, irritation, and, most dangerously for his image, a whiff of entitlement. "You don't understand what it's like," Harry snapped, his voice taking on a sharp, almost pleading tone that made him sound more petulant than sympathetic. "You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected, to have every word twisted, to be under attack every single day." Stephanopoulos leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, he smiled. But it wasn't the polite kind, it was the smile of a man who knew he had just cornered his guest. Actually, Prince Harry, he said evenly, I do know what that's like. I spent years in the White House during some of the most controversial moments in modern American politics. I've been attacked by both parties, had my integrity questioned, my motives shredded. The difference is, I didn't flee the country and spend years complaining about it on television. The comparison landed like a gut punch. Everyone in the studio knew it. Harry, once framed as the victim of forces beyond his control, now stood exposed as a man being confronted with uncomfortable truths. That's completely different, Harry protested, though his voice lacked conviction. You chose to enter politics. I was born into this. I never had a choice. Neither did your brother, Stephanopoulos replied instantly. Or your father. Or your grandmother, for that matter. They faced the same scrutiny, the same expectations. The difference is, they stayed. They did their duty. You left, and then wrote a book about how hard it was. He paused, letting the silence tighten around them. So tell me, who really lacks character here? The words hit like a death sentence. Harry opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His composure, his training, his carefully built American reinvention, none of it could save him now. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. I think you're being deliberately unfair and hostile. This isn't journalism, George. This is a personal attack. Stephanopoulos didn't blink. This is journalism, Prince Harry. This is what accountability looks like. You've spent years giving friendly interviews, controlling your narrative, avoiding hard questions. But your reaction right now tells us everything. We need to know about why you really left the royal family. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Harry's eyes widened. The mask was gone. For a brief, unguarded moment, viewers saw not the victim, not the prince, but a man on the edge. You want to know why I really left? He said, his voice quivering with rage. It's because of people like you. Journalists who think they can judge every decision, twist every word, and pretend they know better than the people actually living it. Stephanopoulos folded his hands calmly on the desk. So it wasn't about racism in the royal family, or your mental health, or protecting your wife and children. It was about avoiding scrutiny, about not wanting to be held accountable. The accusation was gasoline on fire. Harry's control shattered. The transformation was complete. Gone was the carefully managed empathy, replaced by unfiltered anger. Accountability? He shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. Accountability to whom? To you? To people who've never lived a single day in my shoes? I don't owe anyone an explanation for the choices I made to protect my family and my sanity. Actually, Stephanopoulos replied, rising slowly from his chair, you do. You owe it to the British people who supported your family for decades, to the American audiences who've given you a platform to rebuild your image, and most of all, to the family members you've publicly shamed for profit. Harry's chair clattered backward as he stood abruptly, his face flushed, his fists clenched. The crew froze. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. This is exactly what I mean, Harry shouted. This hostile, sensationalist style that passes for journalism in America. You're not looking for truth, you're chasing ratings. For the first time, Stephanopoulos allowed himself a small, cold smile. And you're not advocating for mental health, Prince Harry. You're rehabilitating your image and making millions while doing it. The difference between us? He leaned in slightly. I'm honest about what I'm doing. The line hit like a thunderclap. Harry stood motionless, breathing hard. His entire narrative, the polished interviews, the brand of vulnerability and virtue, was collapsing in real time. I don't have to listen to this, he said finally, his voice shaking with fury. I don't have to sit here and be attacked by someone who came into this with an agenda. This isn't journalism, it's character assassination. Stephanopoulos rose to meet his eye, his tone level and unyielding. No, Prince Harry, he said. This is journalism, when the subject can't control the narrative. The words hung in the air as the cameras rolled, capturing the precise moment the Duke of Sussex's composure and perhaps his credibility finally broke. My father chose the tabloids over his own daughter, Meghan said, her voice shaking with anger. The palace staff leaked stories about me to protect other members of the family. Did they? Andy countered sharply. Or did they just get tired of being blamed for everything while you played the victim? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've turned victimhood into a brand, and anyone who questions it gets thrown under the bus. Meghan's hands clenched into fists. She was struggling to hold herself together. "I will not sit here and let you psychoanalyze me based on tabloid gossip," she hissed. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've lived through." Andy's smile turned cold. "Maybe not, but I do know what you've said publicly, and your version of events keeps changing. In your Oprah interview, you claimed you never Googled Harry or the royal family. Yet years earlier, you posted about watching William and Kate's wedding. So which is it, Meghan?" The directness hit like a gut punch. Her carefully constructed story was being dismantled piece by piece. "Those are completely different contexts," she stammered, her voice faltering. "I may have been aware of royal events, but I didn't research Harry specifically." Andy didn't let up. "But that's not what you told Oprah. You painted yourself as a naive American who stumbled into royal life unprepared. Your own words and your social media contradict that." Meghan's face flushed deep red. Her voice trembled with fury. "You're twisting everything, taking things out of context, building a narrative that fits your agenda." Andy laughed bitterly. "My agenda? Meghan, I'm quoting you. If your story doesn't survive basic scrutiny, that's not my problem, that's yours." That was the breaking point. Meghan suddenly pushed back her chair and stood, the movement so abrupt it startled the crew. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination," she snapped. "This isn't journalism, it's a hit job, and I refuse to be part of it." Andy remained seated, looking up at her with mock concern. "Meghan, sit down. If you can't handle your own public statements being questioned, maybe you shouldn't make them in the first place." "Don't you dare tell me to sit down." She fired back, her composure gone. "I came here in good faith, and you've spent the entire time attacking me with lies and distortions. I've spent the entire time asking about things you said publicly," Andy replied evenly. "If that feels like an attack, maybe it's because you don't like what your own words reveal." The studio was deathly silent. "You know what this is really about?" Meghan shouted, taking a step toward him. "This is about a bitter man who makes his living tearing down successful women. You can't stand that I built something meaningful, while you're still sitting behind this desk gossiping." Andy's expression darkened. He leaned back, a thin, icy smile spreading across his face. "At least I'm honest about what I do. And at least when I leave this studio tonight, I won't need to explain to my publicist why I just had a meltdown on live television." The words struck like a slap. For the first time, Meghan's face faltered, realizing, perhaps, that the cameras were still rolling, capturing every second. "This interview is over," she said finally, her voice low but trembling with fury. "I will not be subjected to this kind of treatment." She turned sharply, heading for the exit, her movements tight and furious, but Andy wasn't finished. "Running away again, Meghan?" he called after her. "Just like you ran from the royal family when things got hard. Just like you run from anyone who won't let you control the narrative." Meghan froze mid-stride. For a moment it seemed she might turn back, but instead, she squared her shoulders and kept walking. "Give my regards to Harry," Andy added, his voice dripping with venom. "I'm sure he'll be thrilled to see how this went." At the doorway, Meghan paused, her hand on the handle. The camera caught her face in profile, an expression of pure rage and humiliation. Then she yanked the door open and stormed out. Andy turned slowly back to the cameras, straightened his tie, and exhaled. "Well," he said dryly, "I guess that's one way to end an interview." The audience sat in stunned silence. The most explosive celebrity interview in recent memory was over, ending with a walkout that would be replayed, dissected, and memed for years to come. Meghan Markle had walked into Andy Cohen's house thinking she could control the narrative. But she'd discovered the hard truth. Some stories can't be managed, and some interviewers can't be charmed. That night, the Duchess met her match, and the entire world watched her unravel.